Chapter 36. Chapter 36 is continuing chapter 35, and it's going to be rounded off in chapter 37. And the focus of these chapters is what is the point of everything. In short, Tanya, especially for the applicability of it, what does this have to do with me? Some chapters is pretty obvious. Some chapters it might not be as obvious. But one of the key things is to remember that because the Alter Rebbe was writing this in response to people who would come to him for Chassidus, is what do you think the question would have been? And if you could figure out kind of what the question was, what would somebody have been asking here, then you could kind of figure out what the applicability is. Anyways, that's a side note. So, as we've been told many times before, what is the point of everything is dir b'tachtonim. We have to make a dwelling place, a home for God, a place where God could come into this world. Here I am, and I am totally comfortable here. The same way that when you're home, you shed all social norms and all the rules of the road kind of go by the wayside when you're at home. God wants the world to be a home and that God could be in this world and not in this hidden kind of manner. How do you do it? Torah and Mitzvos, etc. Which also, by the way, and I think we've kind of mentioned it before, as we're re-emphasizing this point and relearning it and going through it over and over again, it's a reminder to us that at the end of the day, we get caught up in a lot of aspects of living, that a lot of those aspects of living are really part of the means to an end, and we've made them an end. Because of that, we become very focused and sidetracked by the other things that are supposed to be part of the process and not the end point of the process itself. So in theory, a person could, God forbid, have nothing, absolutely nothing in their life and still fulfill the purpose of creation. Because the purpose of creation is a home for God. The purpose of creation is not everything else that we associate with living a healthy, normal life. Of course, we should have healthy, normal lives. But I'm saying because we get so caught up in those aspects, we forget what the point of everything is. And the point, of course, is dir b'tachtonim. Chapter begins. So well-known statement, a rabbi has declared that the purpose for which this world was created is that the Holy One, blessed be He, desired to have an abode in the lower realms. I'm actually learning the first Basi Lagani now, the one from 1951, 5711, and the rabbi addresses it like Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu, and then they're talking about there's two different ways of answering it, which it's not all fully in the Mimer, all of it. When you're learning the Mimer, here's an explanation for it, because when you say God desired, the whole thing is that a desire in general doesn't make sense. Even when someone just has a craving for something, you can't explain it. So now you're going to talk about a desire of God, which is totally inexplicable. We don't understand him, so we definitely don't understand what his desires are. But however much we could understand it, if we want to take it from a logical perspective, the level that we could understand it at is that we say, what are we all doing here? Because God decided he wants us here. He wasn't like sitting around and like, I'm bored. Let me make little menchies, like the mitzvah menchies. Let me have some menchies that can move around. I'm going to build a world. It's going to be wonderful. No, he didn't need us. For whatever reason, he decided he wants us. And because of that, he created the world. The other thing that it goes to is it's trying to explain how do you know it's a higher world and a lower realm. Part of that is also asserting how do we know that this is the world where everything's supposed to be going down in. It's part of like that whole thing of, is there other life forms in space? What else is out there? A lot of that, it might be interesting questions to ask, but it's not necessarily the focus of what we're doing here because the Torah is given on this earth, in this world. So, especially knowing that we have all the different realms, how do we know this world, this lower world, especially because it's such a lowly world, doubled and redoubled darkness world, how do we know this world is it? We have a general idea that first one, when we talk about higher and lower realms, we're not talking about actual physical location, obviously, because it's spirituality, so there's no distance or measurement to it. We're talking about the level of godly revelation. Basically, everything kind of coexists on top of each other. Because physicality is measured and defined by matter and measurement. Spirituality is not. That's what makes it spiritual, is that it's intangible, there's no matter or measurement to it. So when we talk about Atzilus and Bria, Yitzir and Asir, all the higher realms, we say they're higher realms just because there's greater godly revelation that occurs there. Also, when we talk about holiness, what's something that has greater holiness? It's something that has more revelation of God. So that God is more revealed in that sense. So even when we say that someone's more holy, we don't necessarily mean that, going back to chapter 2, we don't mean that their neshama is anything different. Everybody has the same piece of God in them. So when someone's a holier person, it's because their access and their sensitivity to holiness is greater. If you want to be a holier person or higher, you have to try to refine yourself to better access holiness. Try to bring more holiness in. You have this whole idea of the worlds that were created. First you have Atzilus, and you have Bria, Yitzir, Asiyah. The way we described it is someone wants to build a house. Atzilus, there's going to be a house. It's still so close to the general idea, it's not even like a separate world. Okay, well, what kind of house do you want? That's the world of Bria. Things are starting to take a shape now. We're defining what creation is going to be. Then you have the world of Yitzir, that's like a blueprint. We have to show you the form that it's actually going to take on. And then Asiyah, you actually have the house itself. This is all called the Seder Hishtalshalos, because each world's lower aspect is the top of the world to follow. So the same way in a chain, that the end of one link is at the top of the link that comes next. It's called Seder Hishtalshalos. Hishtalshalos is a chain, like links in a chain. So each world that kind of has that overlapping quality, because each of the world has the 10 spheres. So Malchus of Atzilus is the starting point for Bria. Malchus of Atzilus is what leads to Bria. And Malchus of Bria is what leads to Yitzir. Malchus of Yitzir is what leads to Asiya. What is the ultimate purpose of this chain of descent? Why also do we even have a chain of descent? Why do we need to have these higher worlds, low worlds, the different measurements of godliness? Well, first we have to explain a couple of things. Before the world was created, there was only God. He was one alone. God filled all the space. There was only godness. Well, not even just godness, it was just God. For him, it's all the same for him now. For him, nothing changed with creation, which we went through in the 20s when God created the world. What it means for that. The difference is for us. Those of us who receive the light and godliness now, the difference of creation is on our perspective, because all of a sudden now we exist. We're like, hey, there's a world now. For God, there's no separateness. There's no otherness. Everything is still the godness. But for us, it seems different. The way they explain when they talk about Simtsumim Arisha, the first contraction that had to occur, God had to create a vacuum wherein the world could be created. Because if not, it's just his light. It's just him. And you can't create anything else within the him. Nothing can actually think it exists within the him. It's just not possible. So instead, God had to create this void, which is obviously the void is still part of him, but that void seems like it's not, that light was contracted. That's the contraction of the light. And then it was narrowed down into this being that now allowed creation to come about. No man can see me live, but v'chai, it's even the creatures of the higher realms. Even Atzilus, which is so high and it's such a higher realm and such great godly revelation, everything that occurs after God, after godness, is already a step down for him. Quote unquote, it's like a step away, a removal from him. In the sense of, it's not just all God anymore. It's already a step away of like that light has to be contracted or hidden for everything else to come into being. So if this is the case, how do we know that it's the lower world, that's the world where the fulfillment of creation comes about? Why is it not the higher world? One does not create a significant thing to serve something insignificant. Which means that if Atzilus is a higher world, all the godly revelation, we didn't stop there. We kept going with creation till we get to our physical world. That means that we think Atzilus is the more significant place because there's greater godly revelation, but you don't create something significant to serve something insignificant. Which means that our world actually has a greater significance to it than the world of Atzilus does. The short answer is it's actually not specifically in this chapter. You'll get it in Basil, you'll get it in my Marm and stuff, is that this is a world where Atzmos, God's actual essence, can manifest in a way that it does not manifest in the higher realms. So that's the whole thing. Even though these realms have greater godly revelation, there is something that this world has to it that those worlds do not have. Or else we wouldn't have kept going with creation. You don't create a king to serve a servant. You create a servant to serve a king. This world, there's something about this world that has higher significance and relevance than the higher realms do. It's not actually here. I don't remember which part of Tanya comes up in, where it talks about how Malachim will listen to the Torah study of people on this world. Because we have to grapple with this world, we have an insight into Torah study that they don't have up in the heavens. The challenges that we face is not something they could get. Because of that, it gives us a certain kind of insight perspective into Torah that they don't have, so they come to listen to us study Torah. Anyways, what is the purpose of all this? So now that we have the whole gradations here, and we know God wants us here because this is what his desire was, to fill the world with godly light, to make it into a home for him. Not just that, but because the light that comes from darkness is even greater. It's not just darkness that's turned into light. The light comes from the darkness itself. With the superior quality of light that emerges from the darkness, i.e. when darkness is transformed into light, the resulting light is superior to ordinary light. When you're in a room and there's a lot of light and you turn on more lights, that's nice, but it's already light. Versus a room where there's darkness and all of a sudden you turn on a light. Wow, that's so bright. Wow, look at this light. This world of darkness, spiritual darkness, that we don't see godliness is not evident here. When we bring light into this world, and not just that we're bringing light into the world, but the darkness itself, we turn that into a conduit for light. We turn that into light itself. That is the fulfillment of everything. That is what it's all about. And that is where it's all about. Which is actually, I made the note here, even though I actually think it could appear in a different chapter, so maybe we'll just say it here anyways. There's a fear of being ordinary. People want to have done something. People want to have relevance in their life. Kinophobia, it's spelled K-O-I-N, ophobia. Kinophobia is the fear of being ordinary. When you talk about the fact that we don't need an electrician to turn on the lights, and anybody can do it, Tanya doesn't say you have to be a tzaddik to be able to fulfill Torah and Mitzvos. Tanya doesn't say you have to be a tzaddik to reveal godliness in the world. Anybody can do that. And we're not saying it in a dismissive way, we're saying that in an uplifting kind of way. There's no such thing as kinophobia in the eyes of Tanya. That no Jew is just an ordinary person. No person is an ordinary person in the sense that every single one of us can fulfill the purpose of creation. Everyone can do what it's all about. Not least because you don't create something significant to serve something insignificant. That means that if we're the ones who could bring about the fulfillment of creation, we have some of the higher significance in all of creation because we are the ones who actually bring about the fulfillment of creation. And everything from the world of Atzilus down to the 1,200 species of worms is all here to facilitate and help us in achieving that. Fulfilling God's desire of making this world a home for him. Maybe that's not enough to get a lot of people out of bed in the morning, but that should be. What more can you want? What else can you ask for than to know that you can actually bring about the fulfillment of all of creation? You, specifically. Wishy squishy you can actually do it. And everything in the world is created to help facilitate that. Next chapter is going to go a little bit more into it, so let's go back on track over here. We have all this, and then it talks about how we have great light that's coming to the world, and there's going to be light of the future, and tzaddikim. For this, Hashem gave the Jewish people the Torah, which is called strength and might. Torah, obviously, of course, is what brings about the light in the world. It brings about the spiritual change, it brings about the spiritual light and the spiritual darkness, but it's not just that. Torah is what allows us to actually take in the light also. Because if not, we'd be totally overwhelmed by it. In times to come, messianic times, we're going to have the great bright lights. How do we take it in? So the Torah study that we do now helps us for then. We sort of looked at this a little bit in chapter 5 when it talks about how Torah is food and clothing for the soul, because in the world to come, that's going to be what helps us take in the divine radiance. But here we're talking about even beyond that, when there's going to be the time of great light, the Torah study that we have, the Torah that we've done, that's going to help us take in the light. The receptors that help us take it in. Which again, that's why Torah is called might and strength. Because if not, it'd be too much for us. We actually see an example of that. What it says, it is known that Mashiach's times, especially after Tchias HaMesim, is the ultimate purpose and fulfillment of the creation of this world. For this was it originally created. Rambam tells us the whole world is on a scale, and one deed could tip it one way or the other. Rambam also doesn't say it takes a tzaddik to tip the scale. Every single person has to see themselves as if they could tip the scale one way or the other. I don't know if I told you guys this. Going through the whole thing about B'shvili Nivra Olam, but what it starts with is, the whole thing is that if a person who saves a life, it's like they save an entire world. So the Gemara talks about it, I think, in relation to murder cases. How do you know that this is what the consequence for it is, etc. And there's a whole section there, which it's incredible. The whole section is incredible. It talks about how, first of all, how do we know? Because the whole world was created, then Adam was put onto the world. So all of creation is worth it just for this one man that was put there. So one thing that we're familiar with, that's the context of it. Then it goes into a whole other thing about Adam. It talks about how, look at how great God is, that when a person wants to create many of the same thing, just stamping a coin, they're all exactly the same. God created many, many people, and they're all created in the image of the original man, and no two one of us are the same. Everybody is distinct and unique. I think there's another thing you don't remember, and then the other thing that it goes to is that the world is waiting for us to bring light to it. And you can say, well, me and my light, that's what they say. If you think you're too small to make a difference, try going to bed with a mistake. That whole line. So it's like, oh, the world is waiting for my light? Like, what do you care? Stop bothering me. The world is waiting for my light. This is the lead up to where B'shvili Nivra Olam comes in. As in, like, this is the phrase where the Gemara brings it in over there, is that you could say, oh, who am I and what is my light? But you have to think about how the entire world today, whatever the new census is, they decide there's 8 billion people in the world, all came from one person. Even Chava came from Adam. Every single person who was alive today all came from one person. And if you want to think about it, how much do we even know about Adam? All the years that he lived, all 930 years. We don't have an accounting of all 930 years of his life. We have accounting actually a very short amount of time from that. But at the end of the day, he was one man. He was the first, but there is not a person alive today who did not come from Adam. So say, what is one person and what are their effect they could do? So you just think about it. You say the entire world was created for me. Yes, the entire world was created for your light, for the light that you're going to be bringing into the world. We mean it in a sense of, yes, the world is waiting for what you will do within it. We know exactly what we're supposed to be doing here. We all have the same goal. We all have the same mission statement, but we all have our own way that we're going to achieve it because we're all different people with our own little mix of personalities and natures and nurtures, etc. So we all get to put our own kind of approach and stamp and brand while still doing what we're supposed to be doing. 12 shvatim is 12 pathways to the same thing. So we know that the whole point is Mashiach time. That's for everything that was originally created. That's what we're going for. That's what we're aiming for. And that's something that every single person can bring that about. We saw a glimpse of that at the time of the giving of the Torah, where it says, Atares Adas, you revealed yourself, so we should know that God is the Lord and there's nothing else besides him. So first it says, Atares Adas, Haresa, you showed us with actual physical senses. We actually got to sense it, right? When they talk about how they saw what you usually hear and you hear what you see, it's because our physical senses actually took in the reality. And what's the reality that was shown? Ki Havaya Hu Elokim. We saw that this world of Elokim that we live in, the truth of it is actually Havaya. We saw the glimpse of what the truth of the world is, that Elokim is only a covering for Havaya. All the world comes to the world of Helam, which is hidden, because Havaya is hidden within Elokim. God decided to play by the rules of nature. So Havaya tucked itself into Elokim. Elokim is Ateva, the nature. That's how we take it in. We can't handle it otherwise. It's like you can't just go to the sun and take its sun. Photosynthesis won't work that way. Tanning won't work that way. Vitamin D doesn't work that way. Instead, we take it in through a sun ray. We need a way of taking it in. So how do we take in Havaya? Is through Elokim. That's the shell that was put around Havaya for us to be able to take it in. But the truth of reality is actually Havaya. And we saw that at Matan Torah, which is also a side note. They couldn't handle it. They're like, we want to see God. Hashem says the first Dibra, everybody, boom, is out. Great, can't revive him, bring back up again. Next Dibra, out. So then they're like, okay, never mind, let Moshe Rabbeinu do this. So we saw that. We saw a glimpse of what the time to come will will be when the truth of the world, we will see the truth of the world of Avaya. As it says, from the light of your countenance, you gave us a Torah of life. Torah of life, but also the light of your countenance, that when Pneumius, when we saw the realness of you, there's no concealment before the realness of you. So there was nothing to hide God. When God gave us the Torah at that time, there was no hiding. We saw him without any concealment. God's essence, God gave himself to us in the Torah. When we're going to realize this, and we're going to bring the light into the world, it actually brings in a bunch of different verses. I only pulled 2 of them. It's written that the nations will say to the Jewish people, house of Jacob, house of Yaakov, go and we will walk along by the light of Hashem. As in, at that point, the world is going to be like, hey, you've got this bright light. We all want to come along and join in this bright light. We all want to be part of it. That we're all going to see that the mouth of God is spoken. We're actually going to see the truth of reality, the truth of the way the world is created, all through Godness, God's word. So it's written, and the glory of God Hashem will be revealed, and all flesh will see, etc. Together we will see the truth of creation, but it's not limited to us. Everyone will be part of that. All the nations of the world. So the light that we're bringing to the world, it's funny, when you talk to people in the community, sometimes like people who are more traditional or secular or whatever, I don't know, they get so defensive about talking about saying that we're the chosen people. It sounds so elitist. How can we say that? Nobody else apologizes for like raising their people up. But the truth is, it might be an elitist group, but it's not an exclusive group. So anybody can be part of it. The punchline of it is that when we say we're supposed to be a light unto the nations, so it's the same idea. You're not going to go around shining light on something that's irrelevant. That means the fact that we're going like, hey, all the people of the world, we want to spread the light, we want to share the light with you, we want to bring you into the light. It's because there is relevancy in that. That is important also to say it's not just about us, but it's about our people and the whole world at large. Everyone to be part of the lightness. So you see also that it ends here, that in Messianic times, this light of Hashem, it's not going to be an exclusive thing. It's going to spread out to the whole world and everybody in the world at that time. And that's the end of chapter 36. Mashiach now.